Alien spacecrafts dove into Clearwater Lake in Piedmont, Missouri in 1973. This is Paranormal Christian. Let's tell stories. From February until April of 1973, hundreds and hundreds of local residents and law enforcement reported that they had seen strange lights and strange crafts flying above Clearwater Lake, Piedmont, Missouri, and throughout Wayne County. There were so many reports of different lights and different crafts at different times throughout this time period that it attracted national attention and people traveling from all over the country to little bitty Piedmont, Missouri to witness these things on most any given night. The strangest of all of the stories were from the people that stood near the dam at Clearwater Lake and witnessed some of these crafts, these lighted crafts, diving into the lake, lighting up even under the lake, and flying back out of the lake. Sometimes being down for hours, sometimes being down for days. A physics professor, Dr. Harley Rutledge, from Southeast Missouri State University, there in Cape Girardeau, which is the site of a famous UFO crash, where they actually saw extraterrestrial bodies of the beings. That's a story for another time. It'll be up to you if you want to believe it or not. But this physics professor, Dr. Harley Rutledge, he and his team did a thorough scientific investigative research report and recorded all of it in his book, which I'm sure that you could probably still get a copy of and get lots and lots of details. You know, the way that I was introduced to this story a few years ago, a dear friend of mine, a gentleman by the name of Harry Morris. Harry was 81 at the time, and I have always tended to be friends with people that are much older than me. Harry is one of the most interesting guys. He's gone on to be with Jesus now, but he was one of the most interesting guys I've ever met in my entire life. He was a door greeter at our church, and one day I had come in for church, and he had a little lapel pin on of a shuttle from a space expert. It may have been like Apollo 11 or I forget what it was. And he said, "Hey, you didn't ask me about my space shuttle pin." It was a pin of the capsule, you know, that the astronauts would actually ride in. He said, "You didn't ask me about my pin. Ask me about it." I said, "Hey, Harry, what about your pin?" And he said, "I got that when I worked for NASA." I said, "Worked for NASA?" I said, "What are you talking about?" And he said, "Well, actually," he said, "I worked for McDonnell Douglas." He said, "But," he said, "NASA needed a certain thing done." And he said, "I was part of the team." You know, McDonnell Douglas is now Boeing. He said, "I was part of the team from McDonnell Douglas that went to Florida to work with NASA on the space program." I mean, how cool is this? And so he began to tell me these stories. And at first, I thought they were just stories. And I said, "Did you know any of the astronauts?" And he said, "I did." He said, "I knew several." He said, "I knew Buzz Aldrin." I said, "Did you know Neil Armstrong?" He said, "I did not know Neil Armstrong." He said, "I met Neil Armstrong." He said, "I got to shake his hand." He said, "I got to talk to him." He said, "But I didn't know him." But he named some of the well-known astronauts that he did know. And I said to him, I said, "Well, I've got to ask you, Harry." I said, "Do you believe in extraterrestrials? Do you believe in alien life?" And he got the most serious look on his face. He said, "Yes, I do." He said, "Yes, I do." He said, "Because of the men that I knew personally," he said, "that I talked to," he said, "and because of the things that they told me that they saw." And he said they were educated men, they were intelligent, they were experienced men, you know, pilots and astronauts and things like this. And he said the things that they told me, he said, "I absolutely do believe that there is intelligent life outside of our world here, outside of our galaxy." And he said, "You know," he said, "when I was working there," he said, "I actually took some pictures inside of some hangars." He said, "I had a 110 camera in my pocket." And he said, walking through one day, there was nobody else there, and I snapped some pictures. And I thought Harry was the biggest storyteller. I had to tell you more about him sometime. But at some point, my son and we had gone to Harry's house just to visit with him. And as we were talking to him, he said, I wanted to show you those pictures that I told you about. I said, what are you talking about? And he pulled down some old photo albums, and he began to flip through pages, and there were pictures that he had developed, 110 camera, and they were inside of these hangars. I mean, there was nothing weird. He didn't take a picture of an alien body or anything like that. And I said, you really have these pictures? He's like, yeah, this is from my time with McDonnell Douglas. He said, when I was working with NASA on the space program. Anyway, every story that Harry ever told me, we ended up coming across something at his house that caused us to realize that he was not just making stuff up. But when I was talking to him, he said, you know about the UFOs, the spacecrafts, he said, that dove in and out of Clearwater Lake in Piedmont in the 70s. I said, no, I've never heard this. And so I began to research it, and you can research it too. You can look it up right now and find all kinds of things that maybe you never knew. It's amazing that Wayne County, that whole area, and Lesterville, and Piedmont, and Black, Missouri, Centerville, by many people that research UFOs, that's considered the #1 spot. I heard a researcher say one time, he said, if you want to see a UFO, he said, go to Lesterville, Missouri, and he said, on any given night, look up and watch. He said, you'll see one. Now, I don't know if I believe him about that, but that was a pretty bold statement to make, and there are a lot of reports. I want to hear your UFO stories, especially in light of the fact that our government is now declassifying the Pentagon reports and sharing lots of pictures, lots of videos, acknowledging that there are crafts that they cannot trace to human origin, and they're trying to figure it out themselves. And I want to hear your thoughts and your stories on this. On an upcoming episode, I'm going to tell you about the famous UFO crash that happened in Cape Girardeau, Missouri, when a minister was called to read the last rites and to bless the bodies of these extraterrestrial beings that still had breath in them before they passed away. And you can do with that information whatever you want. Would you follow us here on Paranormal Christian? Would you visit paranormalchristian.com? Would you click on the contact page and send us your story and keep it PC?